Welcome to another bar walkthrough video from SuperfastCPA. I'm Logan, and in today's video, we're going to be going over bar area 3. This is section A9. This is a remembering and understanding topic. Recall the criteria for classifying an entity as a component unit of a state or local government and the financial statement presentation requirements, and that would be discrete or blended. And we're going to be doing that the SuperfastCPA way, which is diving straight into the questions to learn the material. Now, if you don't know much about our strategies, make sure you go to SuperfastCPA.com and sign up for our free 1-hour webinar. In that 1 hour, for free, we will teach you the key ingredients to passing the CPA exam so you don't waste months or even years of your time failing exams. And you'll probably want to learn more after that, so make sure you also check out becoming a pro member or purchasing the study bundle or the total bundle, which has our study materials and the pro course. And you'll get access to a lot of really great things. One of those things is these videos. These are going to be part of the study bundles. Now, they currently are part of the pro course, but we are going to change that in the near future where they're going to be part of the study bundles because it just makes a little bit more sense. But the idea behind these videos is for the YouTube version, we're doing 5 questions, but members get access to the full 10-question versions of these videos. Now, to be totally honest, this video will only have 5 questions for YouTube and 5 questions for the member version because it's a pretty straightforward topic, and I don't like to make 10-question videos when you can learn everything you need to know from the 5 questions. But if it is a topic that is a little bit more complicated or definitely needs more practice, I make 10-question version videos for the people who have purchased these study materials. So if you find these videos helpful, check out buying one of our study bundles or the total bundle, which will include the study bundle and the pro course. Now, with all that said, let's dive straight into the questions for this video. All right, here we are at the first question. Let's just dive straight in. Which of the following best describes a component unit of a state or local government? So if you have any idea what a component unit is, then you might already have an idea when we read through these options. But if you have no idea what this is talking about, that's okay. We are using these questions to learn what we're supposed to know about component units. So let's go through the options. Is it a department within the primary government that maintains separate accounting records? Is it a legally separate organization for which the primary government is financially accountable or whose exclusion would make the financial statements misleading? Is it any organization that receives funding from the primary government, or is it any organization located within the primary government's geographic boundaries? So out of those options, you might have an idea already just by reading these and kind of logically thinking through it. A lot of the time you can do that with the questions, but if you have no idea, that is okay. We are going to use this question to kind of set the base for what we need to know about component units. So let's dive straight into the answer. All right, here we are. The answer is B, a legally separate organization for which the primary government is financially accountable or whose exclusion would make the financial statements misleading. So that's the idea behind a component unit, but let's read the explanation to understand it a little bit better. A component unit is a legally separate organization that is included in a government's reporting entity because the primary government is financially accountable for it, or because the relationship is so significant that excluding it would make the financial statements misleading or incomplete. So it's basically so intertwined with the government, or the government is financially accountable for it, that it is something that if it was excluded from the financial statements, they would be misleading. Now, the organization does not become a component unit merely because it receives government funding or operates within the government's boundaries. Again, it's specifically if the primary government is financially accountable for it, or if it's so intertwined with the government that it would basically be misleading to not include it. So that's the idea behind a component unit. Now let's go ahead and go to the next question to start learning some more about these. Okay, here we are at question 2, and something that we didn't get to do in the first question, but I want to point it out here, is you always want to read the last sentence of the question first. Now, as we're doing these questions, they're not too difficult, so it might seem a little silly, but it's a really good habit to be in, especially for test day, because reading the last sentence of the question first gives you the context for what the question is about. It's basically the actual question. So let's go ahead and do that here. Where is it typically reported in the government-wide financial statements? And we know we're probably talking about component units. Let's read through this. A government has determined that a legally separate organization should be included as a component unit. Assuming the component unit is discretely presented, and we'll talk about discrete presentation in a few questions, where is it typically reported in the government-wide financial statements? Okay, so is it going to be within the government activities, within the business type activities, in a separate column from those activities, or is it only going to be in the notes to the financial statements? So if you have any idea how component units are presented, that's great. You probably already know the answer. But again, we're using these questions to learn. So if you don't know, that's okay. Go ahead and pause the video if you want to think about it and kind of give it a guess. And when you're ready, come back. We'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are at the answer C. it's going to be reported in a separate column from governmental activities and business type activities. So let's learn more about this. Discretely presented component units, and by the way, we're going to learn even more about those in a few questions. Discretely presented component units are generally displayed in their own separate column in the government-wide statement of net position and statement of activities. This presentation distinguishes the component unit from the primary government's governmental activities and business type activities. A note disclosure alone is not sufficient. The component unit's financial information must be displayed separately within the financial statements. And again, that's for discretely presented, and we're going to learn more about what that means. But generally, component units are going to be presented separately in separate columns from the business type activities and the government activities when it comes to being presented in the statement of net position. So we learned a little bit more there about component units. Now let's go to the next question. All right, here we are at question 3. Which of the following situations would most likely require a component unit to be blended with the primary government's financial statements? Now, we haven't really heard that word before, but it might be different than discrete. Let's go through this. Option A, the component unit provides services primarily to the general public. Option B, the component unit serves several governments equally. Option C, the component unit provides services almost exclusively to the primary government. Or option D, the component unit issues its own separate financial statements. So based on what we've learned so far, you might be able to give this a little bit of a guess. If not, that's okay. But maybe pause the video, think through this, and when you're ready, come back. We'll look at the answer together and learn what blended means. All right, here we are. The answer is C. The component unit provides services almost exclusively to the primary government. So this would be a situation where, because it's providing services almost exclusively to the government, then it is going to be blended. Let's learn what that means. Blending is required when a component unit is so closely related to the primary government that it is, in substance, part of the same entity. One circumstance requiring blending is when the component unit serves the primary government exclusively or almost exclusively, making answer C correct. So again, the idea is that it is so intertwined with the government that it's basically part of the same entity, so it's going to be presented with the primary government. However, this is not the only reason a component unit would be blended. A component unit is also blended if it is substantively the same as the primary government, or if it is not a separate legal entity. If any of these conditions, including the one we just learned about, where the component unit provides services almost exclusively to the government, again, if any of these conditions exist, the component unit's financial information is combined with the primary government's financial statements rather than being presented separately. So we learned that with discrete component units, they are going to be presented in separate columns. But when it is blended, because of one of these situations that we just learned about, it's going to be combined with the primary government's financial statements instead of presented separately. So now we understand blended, we kind of understand discrete, and we'll learn a little bit more about discrete in the next question, but we're learning a lot of great things here. Now let's go to the next question to learn some more. All right, here we are at question 4. Again, in this situation, it's a great time to read the last sentence first. How should the corporation most likely be reported in the city's government-wide financial statements? So we know that some kind of corporation is going to be reported in the government-wide financial statements. Let's read through this so that we can be thinking of that. The City of Cedar Falls is financially accountable for a legally separate economic development corporation that promotes business growth throughout the region. The corporation provides services to local businesses and community organizations and operates independently from the city's day-to-day operations. So, based on what we've learned, again, you probably can figure this out. How is this most likely going to be reported? Is it going to be discretely presented? Is it a blended component unit? Is it going to be presented as a fiduciary fund or as a note disclosure only? Now, based on what we've learned, I think you can figure this out. So pause the video, think through this if you don't already know the answer, and when you're ready, come back, we'll look at the answer together. All right, here we are. The answer is A. It's going to be presented discretely as a component unit in a separate column. So again, I think you probably figured that out by now based on what we've learned, but let's go through the explanation. A component unit is generally discretely presented unless one of the blending criteria applies. In this situation, the corporation is legally separate, it is not described as being substantively the same as the city, and it serves a broader group than just the city government. Therefore, discrete presentation is appropriate. Now, if any one of these had been otherwise, like if it was not legally separate from the city, or if it was pretty much the same as the city, or if it was only servicing the city almost exclusively, then it would probably be blended. But because none of those apply here, it's going to be discrete presentation. Discretely presented component units, again, are reported in a separate column in the government-wide financial statements, allowing users to distinguish the financial activities of the component unit from those of the primary government. Note disclosure alone is not sufficient. So I think it's pretty clear now the difference between blended and discrete. So let's go to one more question to kind of solidify all of this. All right, here we are at question 5. How should the building authority be presented in Maple Grove's financial statements? Let's go up to the top. The city of Maple Grove is financially accountable for a legally separate building authority. The authority owns office space that is leased exclusively to city departments and provides no services to outside organizations. So how is this going to be presented? Now, again, this is the last question. I think you've learned what you need to know, so I'm not even going to read through these options. I want you to pause the video, think through this, and when you're ready, come back. We'll look at the answer together to see if you've learned how to distinguish between blended and discrete. All right, here we are. The answer is D, blended, because it serves the primary government almost exclusively. Again, that one shouldn't have been too hard. Let's go through this one more time. One of the key criteria for blending is that the component unit serves the primary government exclusively or almost exclusively. In this situation, the building authority exists primarily to support city operations rather than serving the public or other governments. Because the relationship is so close, the authority is reported as a blended component unit and its financial information is combined with that of the primary government rather than shown in a separate component unit column. So again, that one shouldn't have been too difficult because it was pretty obvious that it exclusively serves the city, therefore it's going to be blended. So we learned a lot in just 5 questions. We've learned the basics of component units and discrete and blended. Now before we do anything else, let's do one more part of the SuperfastCPA CPA process called pillar topics. Now, if you've never heard of pillar topics from our previous videos, here's a quick rundown. The idea is that as you're going through the questions to learn the material, you will notice the things that keep popping up throughout the questions, the same concepts, the same equations, the same formulas, whatever the case is, and you're going to pull out those key things that you learned from the questions and have them as your pillar topics. You write them in your own words so that you can understand and know the key ideas you were supposed to learn from that group of questions, from that topic. So we're going to go ahead and look at the pillar topics for this video so that we know the essentials of what we were supposed to learn. All right, here we are at the pillar topics. Again, this is basically a summary, the basic ideas of what we were supposed to learn from those questions. So let's go through this. A component unit is a legally separate organization that is included in a government's financial statements because the government is financially accountable for it, or because leaving it out would make the statements misleading. Also, a component unit is blended when it is essentially part of the primary government. Blending is required if it is substantively the same as the government, serves the government almost exclusively, or is not a separate legal entity. If a component unit does not meet any of the blending criteria, which we just talked about, it is generally discretely presented in a separate column. And this is a key point that I didn't necessarily stress throughout the video, but I want you to know this. Most component units are discretely presented. In fact, that should be your base assumption. You should assume that a component unit is discretely presented unless the facts present otherwise, pointing out that it's probably blended. But other than that, it's almost always discretely presented. Last, blended component units are combined with the primary government's financial information. Discretely presented component units are reported separately so users can distinguish them from the primary government. So again, those are the pillar topics, the main ideas that we were supposed to pull out from these questions. Now, I hope that that was helpful. That's the end of the YouTube version of this video. Remember, we only went over 5 questions today, but in most member versions of these walkthrough videos, they have 10 questions so that SuperfastCPA users can get a little bit more help and a little bit more understanding by having those additional questions to practice. If you found this helpful, make sure to leave a like and a comment for the YouTube video. And with that, I will see you in the next one.